Good evening. It is excuse me, Thursday, March 25th, 6:30 p.m. I hereby call the Howell Township Planning Commission meeting to order. We have a roll call.
Williams.
That's me.
Spalding.
Here.
Newstead.
Here.
Bowl.
Present.
Francesco's.
Here.
Stanley. Lolio.
Here.
Very well. Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item is approval of our agenda. Anybody have any suggestions for changes or edits?
Mr. Chair, I was trying to move 12B, which is new business, Mitch Harris, up a little bit so they didn't have to sit through all the rest of it, but I don't know, are they here? Is that okay? So I would move 12B and make that number 10. And then subsequently, the rest of them would be 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15.
I'll support that with the changes Commissioner Bowl has made.
Okay, we have a motion from Mr. Bowl, a second from, excuse me, from Robert. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So moved. Okay, we have the minutes in your packet. Does anybody, take everyone's had a moment to read them over? It's a easy read. Any suggestions for edits or changes, typos, corrections, etc.? Very well, we have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Mike, second from Robert. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I got those names backwards, didn't I?
I think it,
Yeah. I have a brother named Mike. People have been confusing me for the last few years.
Okay, next up is our initial call to the public. We do ask that you state your name and address and keep your comments concise, civil, and within a reasonable time frame. I don't think we need a clock for two members.
I mean, they're here for.
They're applicants. Do you wish to make any public comments?
We're good.
Very good. Thank you. Our zoning board of appeals report. Did we have a meeting? I don't think we did. I tend to remember at least tidbits of it. Okay, we didn't have a meeting, so nothing to report there. Our township board report. We have a couple minutes in here from it. Jim, anything of interest?
so relating to the planning commission, there was a special meeting that I did not attend, but on the first meeting on the third, excuse me, the rezoning on Hydraulic Drive that we passed forward was approved, from industrial to industrial flex. The Heritage Square PUD agreement, was initially voted down. A second vote, it passed. Subsequently, the final site plan approval passed. The amendment for the increased lot coverage did not. That was the purpose for the special meeting on the 17th, and it passed then. So the minutes are there if anyone has any questions.
Is, I don't know, like, Jonathan, is the 3-2 sufficient on the lot coverage amendment for it to pass?
We did look into it because I had the same question, and it was
Yeah,
a simple majority was enough to make it pass.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was allowed to go from 30% to 43%.
Yes.
Okay. I was looking at that.
I would notice, and maybe Jonathan, you know, did the house sizes increase too, according to the plans? Because on one sets of plans, the largest house size was 1,900, but in the meeting, he mentioned 22,000 and something was the largest house size.
Well, so everything we were talking about was actually the footprint of the house, and so I think the thing that threw him off, at least what he claims, is that he didn't know you had to include everything that was an impervious surface. So that was the thing that we had to, essentially that's what he said he was accounting for, is all the impervious surface on the lots. So he says, no, they have essentially one set of, you know, like 5 plans that they build, and they don't really change that much, so
So the numbers he presented on the special meeting were different than what were on the plans, just so you know.
okay, I wasn't aware of that.
The footprint of the homes?
Yes.
Okay.
Don't know if it makes a difference at this point,
Are
but,
you talking like total square footage, or are you talking?
well, on the plans, it had their 5 different models and it had the square footage for each one.
Okay.
It was off in the corner down in the bottom of the plans. So when he was doing his verbal presentation, I think he said his largest home was 20-something. It was in the 2000s, maybe 2,600 square feet.
But okay,
I
But the lot coverage is just the footprint.
it's just the
Yeah,
footprint,
just the
so you
footprint.
could have 1,000 square foot house footprint, but your house isn't 1,000 square feet. You know, if you have 2 floors, it's 2,000 square feet. So I don't know if that's the discrepancy. I didn't notice the change.
yeah, I didn't know if it made a difference or not, so.
And it was probably for about 30 lots total in there, right?
Well,
That-
there's 50 lots that are the smallest
There,
size.
okay.
Yeah, I think it was 48 is what I counted, but about 50, so it's almost a third of the project. But they don't think that, well, I was gonna say, because they were talking about the largest house size, but actually the smallest house size doesn't fit either, under the 30%, so,
Oh, it doesn't?
no, it didn't.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, next up is our ordinance violation report. This seems to gain pages every month.
Well, they don't clear out very quickly, so it does take
Sure.
time.
Stack up.
Yeah, it takes a lot of time. You know, and we don't go out every day, so, you know, some of these, it could be done, but it's not clear yet, so.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple questions, if that's okay.
Of course.
Jonathan, I'm just wondering if there's, or maybe it's on the website, where we can track violations, like monetary fines. Like, they get one, and then they get another one, and I'm just wondering on some of these, where they're at, and if they pay as they go, or if they don't pay at all. I'm just wondering,
So fines aren't the goal, right, getting into compliance is the goal, and so, you will see in the notes whether they've issued a ticket or not.
yeah,
So
I guess that's, so are they graduated tickets, like you get one ticket, oh, I'm back out here at 60 days, whether nothing's happened, you get another ticket, or is it just, I just wanna know how this works, like how many tickets there are, or how many times we visit, or,
So generally, so it depends on the violation, but generally we go out essentially monthly, to check things. We haven't issued a whole lot of tickets. Most of the tickets are for people who are unwilling to really take care of the problem or don't even acknowledge that there's a problem. So if people are willing to work with us, because fines aren't the goal, this is not a revenue generator, compliance is the goal. You know, we're not trying to write tickets, we're not trying to rack up fees and things like that. So there's no place to track it other than that list, and we will list in the notes if they haven't issued a ticket. The first ticket is $100. It does go up after that. Again, we don't issue a whole lot of them. There are 2 kinds of tickets we can issue. There's a ticket that is payable to the township itself, right at the front counter, and those we can waive. So if somebody comes in, it's like, I've got it taken care of, we go out and check it, and it's done, we can just waive that ticket, because we're not really after the money. For things that are stubborn issues, for other reasons, if we feel that it's not gonna get taken care of based on the feedback we've gotten, we can also take that ticket straight to court. So that ticket can be filed with the court, and we can either just leave it with the court and then the fine is due. Either party can request to go before a magistrate, or depending on whether you go before a magistrate or not, you can request a full hearing in front of a judge.
Okay, on the situation with that, the house on Elk Grove that's in foreclosure,
Yes.
does the bank, can this go on for years, or can they get a fine, or can they get a ticket? If nothing's done?
So they can, but it's, we heard today, actually, that it's like through the process, and it's either for sale or someone purchased it, because they want to know what the status of all the violations are so that they can get it taken care of. Yeah, but we were in kind of a black spot there where the owner's nowhere to be found, the bank's not responding, so, yeah.
And then the other one, the one where the house there, the building that was built without a permit, that was on, 222 Bank Drive.
So that was the accusation was that a shed was built without a permit. And so in our investigation, we determined that it complies with the ordinance because it was under 200 square feet, it wasn't on a permanent foundation. So it really did meet with our ordinance from what we discovered as part of our
Okay,
investigation.
I just wondered if something was put on a piece of property without a permit, what's your recourse? Like, do you go out and inspect it and say, you should have got a permit, but everything looks fine, or, I just wanted to know how that works.
So if it was something that did require a permit and we find out about it, then the penalty is 3 times the permit fee. I know that the county building department, if it has to go to them, it's a similar thing. They're not trying to generate revenue with penalties, they really just want compliance, so they do a similar thing where they're just trying to get people to get into compliance and make sure they're pulling the permits they need to.
That's it, Mr. Chair.
No, on that note, I do find it encouraging that the township doesn't see zoning ordinance violations as a revenue stream. You know, you just want compliance. And that's kind of the last resort is the ticketing. The last resort is court, I suppose, but.
Could I ask one question?
Of course.
Jonathan, for somebody who's running a business, some of these are for running a business.
Right.
What is the triggering point that you would do further enforcement? I mean, if someone's bringing their work truck home or, you know, because there's widely different versions of people, you know, running their business out of their home. At what point does it become a problem? Is it because somebody complains? Is it because there's a disturbance or, you know, just like a guy that has his dump truck and his excavator on a trailer in his yard? You know, is that running his business out of his household?
So that is a much harder thing to investigate, especially if there isn't a lot of evidence that can be gathered otherwise. You know, some of the ones we've dealt with have been very easy. It's very obvious what you're doing. We have a lot of evidence. You know, it's open and shut. Others it's much stickier because the evidence has not been provided to us from the person who complains.
Okay.
So we're going off of the evidence that we can see and just gather on our own. So we go out and we try to figure out what's going on. But in the end, I need enough evidence to say for sure that in my mind, this person is doing this. And now you're going to get the letter, you're going to get, you know, if you don't do anything, you're going to get the ticket. If you don't do anything, I'm going to take you to court.
Okay.
But I need enough evidence to do that. And the use ones are harder than the junk ones. If I can see the junk from the street, then, you know, this is easy.
Okay. Thanks.
Anything further? Great, thank you. Moving on to the new number 10. Our new business with Mitch Harris's Building Company for PC 2025-02, parcel 4706-27-300-030, a preliminary site plan review. Jason, you want to just kick us off with this.
Yeah, so the applicant has submitted the preliminary site plan, which you mentioned, and it proposes a 4-unit townhome development at the corner of Grand River and Edgewood. The townhomes are 2 stories and each have an attached garage and a first floor patio. The current zoning designation for the site allows for multiple family housing, and the master plan designates this site for recreation and preservation. While the planning commission must approve a use which is allowed under current zoning as long as they abide by all of the necessary requirements, we found it was worth noting because the applicant has proposed preservation of a large area of the site, which is also in line with the master plan. And our review highlights the deficiencies that were submitted in the application, but we feel that further discussion would be needed on the amount of hard surface area in the front of the building, which may be reduced to avoid an increase in stormwater runoff and include landscaping or green space to assist in mitigating the stormwater runoff, as well as enhance the aesthetics and appearance of the site, as well as discussion of some form of screening along the northwest portion of the site between uses, and strong consideration of some screening along the southwest portion of the site, which abuts Grand River Avenue and would essentially be beneficial to both the future residents of the site and the appearance of the township.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for our planner. I brought it up on GIS and I clicked on the property link and it says it's zoned or it's taxed as commercial. Do we know why?
I think that would be a question for the assessor. Unfortunately, I'm not sure why that
It would, so it has nothing to do with the zoning, because there's office buildings on that position, because it fronts Grand River pretty much.
Yeah.
So there's like an office or dentist office or some place like that
Next door.
right next door, so commercial would, and they're zoned commercial.
So people get confused on this too when it comes to agricultural. They get confused because it is zoned agricultural or is it taxed as agricultural. So those designations mean different things. So that really is an assessor question as to why it's taxed commercial.
So the zoning is multifamily? Okay. That was, one other thing, on the northwest corner, I think you mentioned there's some because you don't actually go out and look at these, do you? Okay, just out of curiosity, I went today, so there is residential to the northwest corner, and I think you mentioned that in your report, something about
Yes.
it was zoned for it, or there might be some future development there, but it currently is there.
Yes,
It's
and it's single family.
I believe so,
residential there.
yes.
Yes, so that was why I mentioned it there, because if it's multiple family, it'd be a little bit more of an intense use, and then the area that does not have the single family right next to it is a separate parcel, and that is also zoned as single family, I believe, in the master plan, which would allow for some change there too.
Okay, thank you. That was it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, can we hear from the applicant?
Maybe, want me to stand up here, or can you hear me from here?
We can hear you fine, but it is being recorded, so microphone does work better.
My name is Pat Keeler, I'm with Ace Civil Engineering, and I'm here with Cody Harris from the Mid-Terrace Building Company. And, we're looking at the letter that was prepared by Carlisle Workman. And, what we'd like to do is maybe just go through some of these items.
Sure.
Get a little clarification on some, bring back in a revised site plan and move forward. My first question though is your process, do we come back to the planning commission for final before going to the board, or is it a 4-step process?
Yeah, you would come back and we would review the final site plan and then recommend or not recommend it for approval of the township.
So would it be appropriate for us to have this meeting tonight, go back, make all these additions, and then just come back in with a final, or is it still a 2-step process?
So I will say that this sort of thing, because you're not asking for a rezoning, does not go to the township board. It would stay here with the planning commission.
Pardon me?
It only stays with the
Oh,
it'll
right.
stay with the planning commission. You don't need to rezone this property for what you're doing,
Okay.
so that would not go to the township board.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, anyway, what I'd like to do is just go through this letter. I see there's like 60 items on there. For the most part, we don't have a problem with any of them, with the exception of, there was a recommendation to try to reduce the pavement there. And it is a tricky little site. There's a very small building envelope, and our building fits on it very tight. And we do have an So the way we have it set up, we wanna give ourselves enough room to get in there, get into the garages and also be able to park in front of the garage and then be able to back out, so. There's not much that we think we can do with cutting down the pavement, but so we kinda like to stick with what we have there. But I'll just go through each item, as far as, locating the trees, that's not a problem, we can do that when we come back in. We can depict the adjacent land uses, not a problem. We can add the wetlands to the site, and, we can add the flood areas, which will actually be the high water mark of detention pond there. Plan. Number 4, it's asking to provide emergency and refuse vehicle circulation routes. Because we're kind of limited to the one curb cut there, what we're planning on doing with the garbage, it would just be, garbage carts that would be in the garage until they're taken out once a week to the roadside there. So there really will be circulation for a garbage truck per se. It'll, pick it up right in the main road. And, we do, have like a little turnaround, a little backup turnaround there on the, Grand River side, to allow people to kind of back out of the driveways. As far as the open space, there's actually going to be quite a bit of open space on this because it's kind of a funny shaped parcel. We're not utilizing a lot of it, but just leaving that natural, is that something that's adequate to the township? Or are you guys looking for like built-in amenities or benches and that kind of stuff?
No, open space is simply just not developed,
Okay. Fair.
is how I interpret that.
Right, so yeah, so that's a real easy thing for us to take care of. We can add that to the plan. The gross area of the project, I think that's actually in the table, schedule there already, but we can double check that and make sure that it's on the plan. Dimensions of the parking we can add, they are set up so that they're a minimum 20 by 10 in front of the garages there, and then also give enough room to back out of those spots. So that we can add the dimensions there to clear that up. We already talked about reducing paving. Provide approval from the health or fire authority. I think I saw a letter there from them already that said it was okay, but they were, seemed like there was one item on there that they were looking for to make sure that that's covered. We can also bring in a landscape plan, in the following section as noted. As far as the lighting plan, this is just a fourplex multi-family unit. And what we're planning on doing is just put some coach lights on the buildings themselves, some photo cells. And is that something that seems like would be adequate in this circumstance? We're not really gonna do any pole lighting or anything like that. It would just
Sure.
be-
Would they be like auto-controlled dusk to dawn?
Yep.
Yeah, that's similar to the development.
So we can clear that up and add some detail to the plan and make sure that's clear. Add detailed floor plans, the existing building. I'm not sure, Colby, do you know what you submitted on that as far as the floor plan?
I thought that those were submitted, but nobody saw those.
Or again, we can double check.
I don't see them in the packet here, but
What's the square footage on the units per unit? I wasn't able to see that.
I don't know off the top of my head. Do you know that?
I can pull it up right now.
And while you're looking at, are these gonna be rentals or are you selling individually?
I think you're gonna sell them as condominium units.
Yeah.
As what?
You're gonna sell them as condominium units?
The first floor is about 800 square feet, and the second floor is about 1,700 square feet total.
So that is per unit, so times 2 for a duplex.
I'm sorry.
That is per unit, so if they're duplexes, it'd be times 2?
It's actually a fourplex.
Fourplex, okay, so times 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you said the first floor was 800 square feet, the second floor was,
916, because it goes over the garage just a
okay,
little bit.
so
catch
Yeah,
it all.
typically it's a diagram of the building showing, you know, the color or color options.
Okay,
But we don't need physical samples. If you have them, you can bring them in, but.
okay. Yeah, we can try that. And then, I've already talked about the garbage for the site, it'll just be the fruit parts that are coming around, so. With that, we have no problem taking care of all this stuff, so assuming the appropriate thing's probably gonna be to, ask for a table here, and then we'll go address all this stuff and come back and try to make a clean sweep of the next cycle. Is there anything else that popped up that I didn't mention in this letter, or?
Can I ask you a couple questions?
Of course, sir.
It's gonna be its own little association there with the 4 units. Is it gonna be tied to River Downs at all? Association, or this is gonna be self-standing and,
I believe it's gonna be self-standing, is that correct?
Correct, no relation with the River Downs.
okay. No plans to develop the other part of the site, at least now, or,
Not at this time.
It's
okay,
kind of a difficult access over there.
okay. And then, I've been around, I think, for a long time now, but, I was glad to see you're doing it slab on grade, cause I think like 30 years ago, it was all filled in there. I think that whole area was low
Okay.
and on that, so, and then I think we need to provide the applicant a little bit better direction or something more definitive on 13, because it's, applicant shall provide a professionally sealed lighting plan, unless you don't have any concerns with that. We don't want you to, just be okay with just the lights on the buildings, and, I don't want us to tell you that, no, you need to have, like a photoelectric, where they do a.
Yeah, we can take a cut sheet of the, lights we'll use there, we can do a little photometric grid, we'll show the four locations of the, or whatever we decide on the number of post lights, and show how that'll light basically the front of the buildings up to the parking.
Okay, is everyone okay with something like that?
Sure.
Yeah, if we just put it on, put it on the elevation or something.
Okay.
Is that?
Yeah, but normally the engineers do,
Yeah.
that plan. I don't think it's necessary for this, If you have parking lot lighting or in that area, then that's a different concern, but, okay, that is
But there's no street lights or anything like that, right?
Pardon?
There's no street lights or anything like that?
No,
Yeah.
nothing close.
Did you guys wanna talk about what kind of screening we're asking them to come up with?
So I believe it being multifamily has to be screened from the residential, so I did go out to your lot, and I like your location, but it's gonna be a really, really tight fit, isn't it?
Yeah, there's not a lot of room to work in,
So I would be more interested in seeing some dimensions, a little bit more detailed about, because there's that detention pond in the back that's all fenced in. And I think that belongs to River Downs. There's a big pipe coming out of it.
I believe that's part of that project. I guess the question I would have is, do you have access to that detention basin?
correct, yeah, I think that was part of the original development, I think the drainage area of this site was included in that design of that region.
Have you gotten anything, because I received some complaints from some residents a little bit further north of there, they have drainage problems coming down that hill. Have you spoke with anyone from the Drainage Commission yet?
I actually spoke with Ken Ricker some time ago on it, and then we kind of sat for a while, and then we got back after that, so.
I would like to see something a little preliminary from them, if,
Pardon me?
can we see something preliminary from the Drain Commission, because like, it's a really tight lot. I like the location, because you're right there on Grand River, and that goes to the lighting too. I don't necessarily think we need bright lights, because I think it would be distracting to the drivers on Grand River, quite honestly. So, that would be my concerns, besides the ones that are already listed in the planner's report.
So back to the screening, are we talking about arborvitae's, we talking about fencing, what do we, I live by the site too. I guess if I live in the neighborhood, I'd rather see something like arborvitae's than a fence, but if we're supposed to discuss it, what do you guys?
Is it generally bermed?
Just one quick note on that, we did say we would tile the existing trees there, and it once we tie them out, get them on paper, we'll be able to better tell what we can save on the lot. Did you have anything else to add, Nicole?
That first, number one, location of all trees having a diameter of 6 inches or more marked. I think we included that site plan with, trees that we did mark. That would be safe.
Those are the blue and green dots?
Those are safe?
Those would be safe, yeah, we marked them greater than 6 inches. And then the rest of the vegetation on that lot in the building envelope
That's
is
what this is, right, yeah.
pretty much scrub and brush that obviously wouldn't be safe.
So really, this is a U-shaped lot, so once you get your setback from Grand River right away, how much room do you actually have left? I'm just kind of curious.
I don't have the plans right in front of me here, but, yeah, it's pretty much,
I mean, could you even like, put like a walking path to the second part of the parcel, or, I don't,
well, there's, we can work with that kind of stuff outside the building.
yeah, I'm just,
But, the building itself has very little room to move.
right. Pretty steep elevations too.
Pardon me?
Pretty steep elevations too that you gotta deal with to get down to the detention pond.
But, like I said, we can, in our landscaping plan, we can clear out those misty trees that are on site.
So personally, I'd like to see a berm or something covering, especially on the Grand River side. And obviously the residential side would be on the north side, I guess. I guess it would be the east, going towards that'd be their backyards. You're looking over there's a commercial building down there too, the next lot down, correct? Is that, if I'm picturing that right?
I'm sorry, kind of echoey for me.
I said there's a commercial building they'd be looking at through their backyard, right?
It's kind of, I think it's pretty well, you're saying the residential people be looking for commercial.
Well, the people that bought your condos, their backyard would not necessarily.
It's kind of just backing up and kind of looking towards the retention pond.
Okay.
And then the
Yeah,
lot's
is it-
kind of a big long U, so.
So then,
Yeah.
It's actually facing the detention.
yeah.
So screening on the backside, I wouldn't see where you'd need any at all, so. If you're gonna leave the natural, it's already there. So,
So yeah, here.
that's
In
be
here.
along Grand River, yeah, the house is
Yep.
back in here. is what
Yep,
I was
right
looking
there.
at.
There are some decent sized trees back there. Are they, when you were out there, are these reasonably large trees that?
They're good sized trees, but
They're
there's
trees,
quite a
okay.
bit of gap in
Okay.
between them, so.
I guess that's all we have, unless, you guys got any questions for us at this point?
Well, there's a few action items here for you, sir, but, you can propose a motion for approval pending, addressing those bullet point items. Looks like the MHOG and Fire Marshal have given you a green light. I mean, presuming you're gonna put addresses on the front of the buildings. Is there any further questions for the applicant?
I think there was a question about the sewer might be filled in or broken off or something.
Yeah, we'll have to get that verified during construction, they'll probably have to dig it up, expose it, and fill it, if it's broke up a
And there was a determination whether it was gonna be one water line feeding it or separate or something along those lines. I think that was gonna be your choice, but
On the sewer or the water?
I think that was the water though.
Yeah, there was, if it was gonna be owner occupied or rental units.
Yeah, so we're gonna have an individual
Okay.
service lead in each unit, so that's, I think is what the, thing I was saying.
Yep.
So each unit could be turned off individually and separately from any other unit.
Separate building, yeah, that's standard. Okay, nothing else? Do we have a motion on this part?
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to postpone PC 2025-02, parcel number 4706-27-300-030, until such time the applicant, how much time do you figure you need?
I'm not sure how your meetings work, but, like, you meet once a month,
Yes.
Yes.
and then the drawings are due, 14 days in advance or something like that, but
It's the month before, so for April's meeting, the drawings were due today.
okay, so, yes, we're already missed next month's meeting, right? So we would definitely be ready for the next one, you know, give us a couple weeks to get the drawings revised and back into you. And then that will give you like 6 weeks before the meeting. Am I reading that right?
I mean, we just need the 30 days, yeah.
How about until such time the applicant can address the concerns in the planner's report on, I'm just gonna say 1 through 16, I know some of them have already been addressed, so if they're not there, then they'll just disappear when you come back, so. The only one you did say you had a problem with was number 10, reducing the pavement to the site,
Yeah, exactly.
and we can take that up with the rest of them, I guess, so. Any other amendments we need to make?
Seems legit. Okay,
Support?
motion by Mr. Ball. Support from Mr. Newstead. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll see you then.
Okay, moving forward. We have our public hearing for renewable energy ordinance. I have a motion to open the public hearing.
Mr. Chair, I'd make a motion to open the public hearing.
Motion from Commissioner Bowl,
Support?
sorry. Second from Mr. Newstead. All in favor?
Aye.
Call to the public is now open. We have no takers. Can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Mr. Chair, I will make a motion to close the public hearing.
Thank you, sir. Support. Motion by Mr. Newstead, support from Mr. Francescos. All in favor?
Aye.
That's not good. Okay. Our next item up is a legal update.
Do we still need to discuss the renewable
Yeah,
energy ordinance?
I'm sorry?
I think we still need to discuss the renewable energy ordinance, though, after the public hearing
Oh,
that we flew through, so. It should be A, I think, 10A.
yeah, right,
Actu-
right, right. I'm sorry. I thought
Actually, it'd be
that was
11A now, I think, with the way I
That
changed
that was
it.
the, subject of that public hearing. But, okay, we can talk about our renewable energy ordinance. That's, less dry than the legal update.
Well, I guess I want to throw something out.
Sure.
So at the meeting that we've been going to on Thursday, there's officials from all over Livingston coming together. So Cohasset is dealing with this right now. And they have decided that they're going to designate a certain area to allow solar to come in. And I'm just wondering if maybe it would be beneficial, maybe to ask Supervisor Fosdick if he would come in and kind of explain what they're going through. I think I said before, my concern is that if we don't do something, then somewhere along the way, the state is going to make somebody an example. You can say no, 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 but, you know, the state, until this lawsuit is settled, the state might come in and say, well, you're the one that's gonna be an example. So I would hope that the public would understand that as much as we would like to say no, there's a detriment or a danger to anybody that just wants to be resistant to say no. If we would give up our total control, if we just say no and be ceding it over to the state, and that makes me a little worried. So I just want to have a discussion and see what you guys think, or Grayson, if you have some thoughts on it, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I'd say that that is how we've seen a lot of townships approach it, especially those who are really not so in favor of renewable energy. They are still trying to retain some of that local control and regulate what they're able to, and at least make the effort to allow the larger developments, if they come in, to have that option to go through the township. And there was an overlay or an overlay map that was proposed here as well, similar to Cohasset's, that would kind of limit the areas that it would be allowed in, unless the state says otherwise at a later time.
I think, if I remember right, in Howell Township was 2 areas, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
We have an overlay district, correct?
We do not. The only overlay district we have is for the wellhead protection area.
Jonathan, could you bring that one up that you had up before? Do you have it handy? I hate to put you on the spot, but remember that one you brought up where you showed the one up on the northwest corner?
The one near Owasso?
So I can bring up the map and I can show you what it is that I showed you before.
Okay.
The map that was used before was a little more ad hoc. It wasn't, you know, the thing that they provided for us. I don't have an official map to show you, but I can show you the area and I can kind of highlight where we were looking at. That would be beneficial.
So that, I think you guys in the past brought up that overlay because that was close to the transmission lines and it was one of the more rural.
Low density and close to those transmission lines.
Right.
It made the most sense to put it there.
Maybe you were on it.
Yeah.
We were on that committee.
I think
Okay.
that's what the idea was. That was the only area that it was like, it made sense to put one.
Am I correct that both of the parcels were owned by Rick Van Gilder?
There were other owners in that area.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
But the, I mean, the Van Gilder property
Was the-
on the
was
west
the
end of the
majority.
township was, you know, it's a large
Yeah.
tract of farmland
Mhm.
and it's near the transmission lines.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, he had an interest, am I not correct in that, or did he had some interest in renewable energy possibly being?
I know that Mr. Van Gilder or the Van Gilders have done this in other communities that they own property in. I have no knowledge whether he's interested in doing that on this parcel or any of his land here.
Okay.
Sorry.
As this is private property, should the township decide to do nothing, can the state mandate solar energy be installed on private property?
So Grace and I know the answers better than I can, but essentially what we're doing is we would allow people in this area that we designate. If we go
Right.
forward with this and we say this is the overlay district, then people that own property in this area could put large scale solar.
Sure.
So this is, when we're talking about large scale, we're not talking about the things on your roof or if you have a small thing
Right,
outside.
a solar farm.
It's solar farm, yeah. So it would allow them, if a solar company came to them and said, hey, I wanna do this, then this is a thing that they'd be allowed to do if they're interested in doing it. They can tell the solar company no. But if they say yes, and the solar company then comes to us, say, hey, I wanna put it here, this is where the solar overlay district would say, well, here are the rules that apply. If they either don't like the rules that apply or it's outside of our zone, that's where they could go to the state under PA go to the state, and then they go through the state process, and then we wouldn't decide, the state would decide whether the solar farm would go there or not. That's still true, so even if we go forward with this, and our overlay district isn't in an area where a solar developer wants to go, we have other large tracts of farmland that are just not near the transmission line. So if you were the owner of that property, the solar company comes to you and says, I want to do this, first you would have to say yes. The state cannot say, you're gonna put it on there if you don't want to.
Yeah,
It's
I
still
wouldn't
your
think so.
property, right? So if you're leasing it to the solar farm, or if the solar farm buys it, company buys it from you, then they would have those same rights, and then they can either come through us or go through the state. Does that make sense?
It does, it does.
So I'd like to point out before we get too much into this ordinance, and correct me if I'm wrong, Grayson, but this one is applying to understate nameplate capacity. So this is not a Creo that works with the state. This is, yes. So I mean, a developer could come in and work with this if they determined it would be a workable ordinance. But our hands would pretty much be tied if the landowner wanted to put solar on it and the company or that was putting the solar up decided to bypass the township and just go to the state. So it's kind of like we can try to regulate it, but under P 233, they have the right to go.
Exactly, they can still go to the state, can override our,
Sure.
I don't want to say requirements, so suggested requirements.
So would the overlay even play into this in that circumstance, Jonathan? Really?
Say again?
Would the overlay actually play into this circumstance at all with this particular ordinance? Because they're basically dealing with under nameplate capacity?
But people that are over nameplate capacity could still go under this if they wanted to. If they thought that they would get better and faster development
Sure.
through us, then they can still decide to do that. It's just they don't have to.
Okay.
They can just go straight to the state. I just don't know if they would prefer to work with us or prefer to work with the state. I don't have those answers, and I don't know if Grayson's worked with other communities and have that understanding.
So would an overlay do us much good anyway?
So the overlay would mostly be intended to regulate those under nameplate capacity. So if you guys have no interest in regulating where those would be placed within the township, the overlay would not be necessary. But having that controls at least what's under nameplate capacity, because that is where the state is not going to come in and do the review for. That's where the township will do the sole review, and there's no worry, I suppose, that it could go up to the state if it's not above their designated nameplate capacity.
So if somebody that wasn't in the overlay wanted to put solar on their house, would they have, this ordinance would apply to them?
So that, yes, but there's a different section in the ordinance that is for accessory solar uses.
Okay.
But say they wanted to put a windmill next to something, they're not gonna be allowed to do that.
Sure. I think I saw an application in our permit list for residential solar, didn't I?
It's becoming more popular.
Right.
We're getting more of it. And I would say, we do have a solar ordinance right now. I would just say it's very outdated. And so even if, in the end, you determine that you don't want to do a solar overlay, I still think you should look at that solar ordinance and make sure that it has the regulations that you guys think are appropriate.
So would this one update the one that you say is outdated?
I think that
Yes,
they are
okay.
addressing that.
Okay. Just so we're clear on what we're trying to do. So we do need to update the residential accessory uses, and we should probably include an overlay for larger people that are actually selling. That was the key thing. If you're actually gonna produce it to sell to somewhere else, I think is probably where the overlay should come into play.
I mean, I would assume we have residents in the township that have personal solar panels on their home, correct?
We have both on their home and kind of standalone panels,
Okay.
but yeah, on their own property.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that they're using it themselves, because we don't always understand or know if they're putting in a battery systems. The only way to use it is if you have a battery backup.
Right.
So, unless you are totally off grid. But, so those units are selling the stuff back to the power company.
Yeah. If anything that they're not using,
They don't use it, but it does go, my understanding is essentially it's like a credit system, right? So I used 3 kilowatts, but I also generated 3 kilowatts. I know they're not gonna pay me dollar for dollar, they pay you less, but let's pretend that they don't. I wouldn't have an electricity bill, right?
Right,
So that's how, where you don't actually use your own power.
okay.
You're contributing to the grid, and
Right.
you get credit for it.
Yeah, I understand.
We don't have any, like, large-scale solar ordinance right now. The ordinance that you referred to, Jonathan, is that for, like, as an accessory use right now?
I haven't read it in a while, but I would say, yeah, I don't remember there being anything in there for anything other than what you would put on your house or, you know.
Wasn't there for commercial properties for, you know, you could put it on the roof of your warehouse? I don't know if that was in existing or if it was proposed, I don't recall.
Without going back to our current ordinance, I don't know if that's on there, but I would still say that that's essentially, that's personal. It's not that large scale thing that we're talking about.
Oh, yeah, right, nowhere near a solar farm, certainly larger than what somebody's gonna put on top of their garage, right?
And Grace, I don't know if this is a question for Grayson or Jonathan, but if we adopt this ordinance, we don't necessarily need a solar overlay district, correct?
Yes.
Would there be an advantage to not having it or having it? And maybe,
I'm not sure I would say advantage or disadvantage. It would be more of a preference if you're trying to control which areas of the township are going to have it. But what I've noticed is that, like you guys were saying, if it's near a transmission line, that's more likely than not where someone would want to put a bigger facility. Accessory would be a lot smaller, wouldn't be included in the overlay district necessarily anyways. So it really just depends on what you're trying to get out of the ordinance.
It's more for commercial use.
Yes.
I think the overlay kind of eases the process of a utility company wanting to lease or obtain land for this purpose.
Right.
It's not necessarily defined as this is the only place you can do it, but this is an easy place to do it.
Yeah.
And then at that point, it's between
Right.
the utility and the landowner to work out a deal that they have to abide by, our setback rules, our fencing, our signage, that kind of thing. Unless they wish to get in line and work through the state, where this would ease their entrance into our township. Yeah, give us some control at least over, you know, setbacks and landscaping, et cetera. You know, it's I don't know what the state's standards would be for that. Probably less restrictive than
I
ours.
haven't seen the state standards, so I don't know what theirs look like.
I think you mentioned that we don't meet them, right? This ordinance doesn't meet the state standards,
This exceeds their,
which I'm okay with that. If the state's gonna come in and tell us we gotta do something, let them, but if that's their prerogative, so.
We can't stop them, so what?
Sure. So another issue I think that I should address, because it disturbs me, and just so we know a little bit more what we're getting into, I was on Marketplace looking at some used cabinets, and don't ask me why, but it was just an ad that caught my eye, and they said that they were, full disclosure, that they were toxic because of a Shark vacuum cleaner lithium battery fire. So apparently the insurance company wouldn't. So then I looked up what happens when lithium batteries catch fire. And I asked Jonathan, maybe he could bring up, does anyone Google and just do AI ever? Just Google BESS, RBESS, which is Battery Energy Storage Systems, safe. And when I brought it up, it says those systems, while crucial for renewable energy integration, pose risk including fire and explosion due to thermal runaway, toxic gas emissions, and potential environmental contamination, requiring robust safety measures and careful siting. And then, I mean, anybody can do this, just Google it.
Of course.
And then even further, when you get into solar panels, that once those panels get broken or they're removed, they're deemed hazardous waste.
Yeah, yeah.
How are they disposed of, do you know?
Not exactly. I haven't had enough time to research that. But I know there's two different types of panels and one's worse than the other. So these are the type of items that we're gonna be putting out in our rural farmland. So, and I think that was my question with the ordinance is written, is it now? And I think I questioned a little bit earlier or the last time about the battery energy storage systems. Cause I think they're all in, they're like 50% of the lot or something like that, or?
Yeah, and I will say that they are lumped into one category. It doesn't separate them out by different types, which is something that we could look further into if you wanted to enforce one.
I mean, to me, it takes more research on my part. I mean, I don't feel comfortable with it because you get two different experts and they all say different things. But I do have a problem with one of the main factors we're always supposed to be looking at on this commission is the public health and safety and welfare.
Of course, yeah.
And how can we be doing that without putting the right safeguards in for these type of things? So I know we can't do exclusionary zoning because we have to allow it, correct? If it's a need, but maybe Grayson can help me. How come this hasn't been put into an industrial area to begin with? Do you know why?
I think a lot of that has to do with the state law and how they went about regulating it, so that it kind of trickled down into how townships are able to regulate it. That is one benefit of having your own ordinance, I will say, is because the state doesn't have many, if any, decommissioning requirements for the larger scale ones, and this would enforce those for the smaller and larger if they chose to go through the township.
So basically, it boils down to money. It's easier, it's cheaper for the companies to put it on land that's already cleared, which that's farmland. I believe MSU did one over some parking areas, and there's different options of doing it, but it comes down to cost. And I don't know if these projects, with the political climate being what it is, green energy is not as popular as it was. And without subsidies, would these solar fields even be in place, or windmills? Because my understanding is they're not profitable without subsidies. So when the subsidies goes away, what happens to them? Does a developer walk away in 10 years? And we're and that's obviously some protections we need to talk about decommissioning and having the right bonds or money put into place so we can take care of this if that happens. But
What do you propose? Those are all good arguments. That we do nothing? We take our chances? I mean, I'm asking you.
well, right now, I think we need to update what we have for sure, but I think we just need to take these into consideration too. Obviously, I'm not the first one to come up with this argument, right? And for some reason, they're still putting them out there. Marion Township right now, just south of Mason Road, has, I think, I'm just going to guess, 1,200 acres that are slated. We actually have a solar lease in our township on Grand River. It's not actually made, or it's not in process, but it is identified as one. So it's coming. It's going to be here. But I think we just need to have our eyes open and do a lot of research before we make any more decisions.
I've always kind of felt that the best place for these solar panels is in the median of the freeways. There's transmission lines crossing freeways not every mile, but they're nearby.
You're going to run into MDOT concerns there with people hitting them. Excuse me.
They've
Yeah.
got people out there shoveling dirt. They put up the concrete barriers.
Well, the solar panels are generally safe when they're sealed, right? But if there's a hailstorm or something, they break, and then it rains and they leach into the soil, then you're dealing with a contamination issue. I mean, is that always going to happen? No, but Marion Township just had a pretty good hailstorm a couple of years ago, did a lot of damage. So it can happen.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. I'd rather
I would like-
it on 996 than in the farmland in our township. So.
I would like to collect some more information personally to make an educated decision one way or the other.
Some components of those panels is recyclable. It's not 100%, but it's somewhat recyclable, and it's fairly valuable. But no, you're absolutely right. When they break and leak, it's
If it happens, right?
the battery storage. fire suppression built in, others are basically like containers, and you say that the fire can't breach it.
So if you Google BESS battery fires, you'll find a couple that they breached.
Yeah.
The most recent one was in California, and I know that was on national news. And they had to evacuate 1,500 residents downwind of that because of the toxic gas exposure. And it lists, I mean, anybody can Google it and research it. But it is pretty dangerous once they do catch fire and you get downwind of them. And is that something we want sitting out on Grand River?
If I may, that is also something that is addressed in this ordinance as proposed, is additional fire security measures, because the state ordinance is not as strict, so we did add additional measures in here for that too. But could be advised or revised as well.
So maybe it's like Sharon says, maybe we could have somebody that is more educated than anybody here give us a little more information, maybe. I don't know. How does anyone feel about
That's
that?
certainly welcome. I mean, more information allows us to make a better decision. Absolutely.
You know, my biggest concern is the battery storage, quite honestly. So, and I don't have a big enough grasp on it. I don't feel I have a big enough grasp on it, just in the research that I've done, and I've spent some time on it.
I think we definitely need to have something like this. I'm a little bit less concerned about the solar panels being a hazardous waste. There's millions of them in this country, and we are notoriously known for producing some materials without an end of life for them. We're getting better on things. You can't throw a car battery in a landfill. One, it has value. You go there and say, I want to throw this in the landfill. They won't let you do it. You can come with a TV. You know, the TVs, when your friends asked you to move and you said you knew how big your TV was, so you said you had other plans. Those TVs have 8-10 pounds of lead in them. Yet you can go and you can throw it in the landfill. I think we'll get better as time goes by with these. I don't have a lot of concerns with solar panels contaminating fields on those. I think the things that concern me about this, as you know, those battery storage things, you know, those things can go awry and yeah, they can have fires, but I mean, I work next to a shredder that
Makes a lot of noise.
Yeah, it's loud, but Google shredder fires. In Holland, there's been 2 or 3 fires, you know, and the lithium batteries, we have them in our phones, we have them in our cars, you know, all these things are gonna be there. I think the battery storages are gonna be, you know, isolated with setbacks and some safety measures. I don't think they're gonna be 20 feet from a home, so I'm not as concerned, you know, about those. I think the things that I was impressed with on this ordinance language was what happens if the owner just abandons the project. And I don't know about the tax credits. I don't know if they're all initially, you know, we put in geothermal in our house and I got a 30% tax credit. I got it the next year. Somebody putting in a solar array, do they get that all the next year, or does that get phased out? I don't know. That's why I think it's important that we have some teeth in this and a bond. So if these people are wiped off the face of the earth, we can go and say, okay, we've got the funds to get this site cleaned up. And it sounds like you know, pretty much says we have a lot of input in how much we have of that. And it's secured funds for that, a bond or a check or something. So I'm not as, you know, concerned with you know, with that. And you know, if it makes sense and someone is doing it and the tax credit makes it make more sense, I don't think that's a bad thing either. You know, we'll see in 20 years or 25 years when all these solar arrays are put in and they reach the end of their life. You know, I see them all get recycled or whatever, and it go back to corn. You know, I don't know. But.
I think we agree. Residentially, you know, in a residential setting for like a on-site solar, I think obviously we need an ordinance, but I don't think that's as much. I mean, you could have a Tesla that could have as big a battery in your garage that could theoretically set fire.
Yeah.
I'm thinking more of the nameplate capacity, BESS systems. So, but it is interesting that something as small as a Shark battery going off or catching fire, and you do hear of them, they do happen. But if they release that much contaminants,
That's really one of the strangest things I've ever heard of. My vacuum cleaner caught on fire, so now I'm a brownfield site.
I've seen a couple of garage fires that are, you know, they can't put out because of lithium batteries, lawn equipment and things like that. So
Sure.
Electric bikes.
yeah, electric bikes.
On that.
So I do like a lot of the things that are in our ordinance. These were just some of my concerns, and I think we had a 50% lot coverage for BESS. Now, is there a limit to the size in our ordinance? I didn't see a limit anywhere.
I don't believe it's regulated by size, because I believe that they're kind of a set size for what they're doing, and so they would have to just abide by the lot coverage and setbacks then. Which would also play into if their nameplate capacity or above, then they would have the regulations of the state, but this would allow you to have the regulations for smaller ones that weren't different.
Are we gonna talk about the actual ordinance, or do we wanna dive into that, or is this something we wanna postpone? Or? I had a couple questions, just,
We might as well do it all, right? We're right here now, right?
I'll just go, on page 2 of the ordinance, am I reading this right, that the setbacks is 300 feet from the nearest dwelling unit, or 100 feet from property line, whichever is greater, so no home is around. It almost seems like it's a 300-foot setback, no matter what. Am I reading that right? If there's a house there,
I think you're right.
it just seems like it should just be 300 feet, and is 300 feet the right number? Grayson?
Yeah, so if there's not a house there, it would be 100 feet from the property line. And that is similar to the state. They do 300 feet from the nearest point on the outside wall of an occupied community building or dwelling on non-participating property, or they go 50 feet from the nearest edge of a public right-of-way and of shared property lines of non-participating properties.
Okay, so if there isn't a dwelling unit, it would be 100 feet?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, what that means is
I was
if there's a
thinking-
house there, you can't choose the 100-foot option. It's larger than the
Okay.
so it's 300 with a house and 100 without.
And then on page 4, the last sentence, the third sentence from the bottom, it looks like there's a typo. If it reasonably determines instead of reasonable, that's just a small one. And then the other note I had was on the page 14, Grayson, of just, I think you have to say sale or credit on here, except for the sale of surplus electrical energy. I think we need to include the word credit, because I have a couple friends that have solar, and they just get a credit on their bill. They're not necessarily selling anything to the energy companies. So,
Well, these folks are, if they've got 400 acres of solar panels, you're selling power back to the
oh,
company.
yeah, but a homeowner is gonna be getting a credit, not selling.
Oh, I see, this is accessory solar.
Accessories,
Yeah.
Forgive me for that. I was reading the text and not the title. Well, I think that's legit though. You're selling it back to the company. They're just paying you the credit. They're not gonna write you a check, but.
I'm just saying, I'm saying sale slash credit, so that it covers that.
Sure. No, those are good edits. And this is just an addendum to our existing solar ordinance that we probably want to review in more detail.
But it would replace what we have, correct?
I mean,
Two sections, 1615 and 1619, right?
well, was your intent to replace?
Yes, because those sections cover the accessory solar and then solar farms as they're stated in the ordinance currently.
So that is part of our solar ordinance, an updated part of our solar.
Jonathan, can you refresh me on whose property is what on that map that I'm looking at?
Sure, so I turn this layer, I'll turn it on, it's confusing once it's on, but I'll turn it on so you understand where the township lines are. So everything in red is in the township, those are all the parcel lines, but it's a little messy from this high up, so I'm gonna turn that off.
Okay.
But what you'll see is this is a large, area, I don't know if it's all one owner, everything that I've highlighted. The blue line outside of our, which is outside of our township, is the transmission line that then does cross into the township for a brief time before it then exits the township again. I'll turn these lines on again so you can kind of see it. So this up here is 3 parcels, there's 1 parcel, 2 parcels, 3 parcels. I believe there are 2 owners between these 3 parcels. These down here are mainly owned by the Van Gilders, although there could be others that own some of these, but they are large open tracts of land, and that's kind of the thing that the solar people are looking for, and so this is where we came up with the initial overlay district, which is rural, not near that many homes, so we're not disturbing very many properties, and is near the transmission line. So those are the kind of the things we were looking for in our overlay district. Again, this is not set in stone in terms of what the overlay district would be if you so chose to go that route.
I mean, again, that makes like perfect sense for somebody to look at that map and go, transmission line, huge tracts of land right next to it. That's where we want to put our facility. So, I mean, it's the only place in the township that if you looked at Howell Township, it sticks out.
Right.
It's like kind of abundantly clear that that's where you would want to put it.
And has it been like one question or 2 questions about that piece of property from the owner? Like, are we gonna do anything with solar? Is it?
So the gentleman that owns this parcel up here is the one that keeps coming in and asking, you know, what's the township gonna do? Is there any interest? And it's again, he's not pushing it, he just wants to understand it.
Right,
Yeah.
sure.
Grayson, I had a question on their definitions. Number 3, it says decommission. Could we add something in there? I see when you get further into it, I think it's you actually explain that the ground shall be restored to its original condition within 60 days of removal of structures, which I like that, that's all good. But should that be included maybe in the definition?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe a little bit more of what decommission actually means.
The complete meaning.
Yeah, the decommission includes restoration.
Yes, and it does specify that later on, but
Right.
it's not in the definitions.
Grayson, I have a quick question, just regarding the noise, like, how did they come up with the 55 decibel number? Is that like a standard set?
Yeah, that is, I believe what the state has as well. I know that it goes, Jonathan and I brought this up, and there's different ways to measure sound, and the way that they measure it is the typical way, which is, I believe, just like how loud it actually is, as opposed to like the deep sound levels, like
Okay.
where it like vibrates.
Like,
So it is like the most common way to measure it, and then we were just kind of following their direction on that.
and is that the same with the shadow flicker for the wind? 30 hours per year, that somebody just came,
Yes.
did a study and found that, okay.
With an engineer.
Okay, well, I think we have some suggested edits and minor edits really. And some. I don't know, is there anything we can put in there about regulation of fire suppression for battery storage systems? I think if we get too strong with that, they're just gonna go to the states who may be weaker.
Yeah, I'm trying to. It definitely can be added in here. I know that we have fire response on page 9. And it's 10 and I would say 13 kind of adds into it, but it's not exact.
So this would be a special use if it came in above nameplate, correct?
Yes.
So we would have an opportunity to go through all these at
Yes.
that time, right?
But I can look in to see if there are already more other ordinances that have been passed that have more restrictive fire requirements to see if that is.
Okay. There's nothing further. I entertain a motion. Motion two.
Yeah, it looks like motion 2
Oh,
will
I
probably
suppose
be.
it's this scenario.
Mhm.
Do you, Grayson, do you feel you have a handle on what?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll move to postpone action on the proposed text amendment so that the following items can be addressed. I don't think I can list all of them, but Grayson, you're gonna look at, a little stricter, fire control systems. And what were the other ones? I'm still making a motion.
There was a, pardon me?
Yeah, decommission and restore.
To make it a little bit more, to restore it to its original.
Clearing up.
Right, the decommissioning definition.
Okay, the decommissioning definition.
And then you had several edits too, didn't you, Rob?
And, yeah, just some of the word changes that I had,
Adding credit to the,
yeah. And
And sales slash credit,
yeah,
right?
sales slash credit.
I just sent them to you, so I can't remember what I said. I think that's the end of my motion. Do you have that? Can you make it look intelligent? Can you type it out?
So unfortunately, we type a word for word.
I'll withdraw, no.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll support that.
Okay. That's our, I think you guys been on almost all of them. Motion from Robert, second from Mike. Can I go backwards again? No,
No, you gotta.
I got it right. Oh, I can't keep these guys' names straight, they say it right next to me. All in favor?
Aye.
Simply because I work a full day before coming in here. Okay, next on our agenda is this legal update.
So I'm for one glad that this is in here. Jonathan, I think this is your doing, is that?
I didn't put it in there, but I put it in there because you brought it up before, and this was very pertinent, so I figured it was a good spot to put it in.
I don't know if anyone ever checks with these, but I think it's from Faley and Schutz, isn't our attorneys? Addressing us specifically, the Planning Commission, it says the Court of Appeal reaffirms the Planning Commission denials must include factual findings and conclusions supporting the final decision. And I think that's something that we should keep abreast of. And there's some other interesting stuff which doesn't really, but it goes in here and explains the court decision on why that decision was.
I think the biggest thing, and maybe you guys will get this in your class, the biggest thing is you find all sorts of facts during your discussion, but you need to include that in your motion. If it's not in your motion, it's like it didn't happen.
Yep, that's,
It is the hardest thing to do.
that was
but
just in our,
Yep.
It's important.
that was in our class last Thursday. That was, that without the facts, why you're doing it. It's like,
No, right, absolutely. Yeah.
needs to be included in the motion.
Because bottom line is you always have to constantly think, if this goes to court, then you're challenged. The township's challenged on everything.
Yep.
You better have.
Yep,
Yeah,
so you can
who's
come
gonna
back to
appeal
the
that?
minutes and say,
Facts.
these are the facts.
Exactly, right.
That's why the minutes are important and the motion, the
Absolutely.
minutes reflect the motions, so. Because usually in a higher court, they're just going off the paperwork. They're not,
Right.
and they're gonna be looking at the minutes as in documents. That's all they're gonna be looking at.
Yeah, that was brought up in our class.
Is there any specific reason why we have 4 pages on marijuana licensing procedures?
So this was his legal update for stuff, and this was the entire thing.
Okay.
So some of it is
You
pertinent
didn't cut and
to
paste from
this
it.
body, some of it isn't, but yeah, so, yeah, you see stuff in
I
there.
wonder if there's something coming up on the horizon that might.
I wasn't hinting at anything.
That's good.
You may want to know what's
It's
really.
prep work.
Okay, well, thank you, this is helpful.
That is.
Okay, our next item up is unfinished business, the never-ending ADU ordinance discussions.
Here we are again.
I'm surprised that.
Like a bad penny.
Yeah, I'm amazed that we had zero.
It is spring break, so
Yeah.
a lot of people are gone.
Well, I'll take a stab at it, just because I know this is being recorded for the people who couldn't be here from the public.
Sure.
So some of it you've heard already, but, so Livingston County Planning Department is encouraging communities to review and consider adopting ADU ordinance. The department has suggested this is a way to provide housing for aging relatives, but also with the implied intention as a way to address affordable housing options within a community, or in this case, Howell Township. It has been acknowledged that as a relative's living situation changes, the ADU would inevitably become a rental. And that's the concern I have, and why I have a list of questions and how this would be addressed regardless of the red letter draft language we have discussed and reviewed multiple times. Number one, residents currently living in Howell Township bought their homes in neighborhoods or on lots identified as single-family zoned parcels. I believe many are not showing up at these meetings because they have no idea what is being discussed as allowing neighborhoods behind neighborhoods. And to be clear, we are looking up to 1,000 square foot home with a possible garage. Number two, how would these detached ADUs be taxed? Would they be a homestead or would they be considered a rental unit? Number three, currently we are a complaint-based township and most people abhor the idea of neighbor fighting neighbor. But should this be approved and problems arise, who would be the contact to investigate a complaint that the ADU is not occupied by the neighbor's elderly parents? If proven true, who pays to correct the problem, which would be to evict the occupants the neighbor is renting to? And what if the neighbor is unwilling to do that, or the neighbor has a contract, a rental contract? While this is going on, does the ADU become a taxable rental unit? 4, let's assume the elderly parent ADU does become a rental. As the neighbor next door, a mother and a grandmother, how do I know who my rental neighbor is? As owners of duplex property, we use an agent who is also a retired police officer, so we know who we are bringing into the community. 5, unpaid rent or problem renters is not the responsibility of law enforcement. That's a matter addressed in court. And a problem situation that could escalate into a dangerous one if your neighbor, for your neighbor or for you as the person living next door. Renters have rights, and it takes an effort to evict them even when it comes to non-payment. Howell Township currently has 1 apartment complex up the street from me addressing the problem of affordable housing. And we just approved the ability for other, in Heritage Square, some apartment complexes there. I feel we have recognized the need for more housing and addressed it, and I believe we have discussed and evaluated this ADU proposal thoughtfully and thoroughly. Allowing backyard rental units is not the way I feel that this problem should be addressed.
Very well said.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon.
And I think we've,
Want to make sure that people back home that review this, that are listening to this, understand why I'm a no on this.
so I'll start next. Grace, last time we talked about maybe a special use permit and why, if you needed to add on to your house for an aging relative or something like that, why it wouldn't be allowed in our present ordinance. And then I think this is this is like a blanket accessory use for agriculture and residential.
With conditions. So it's not something that is just permitted, it would still require.
Right, but with first of all, we've never been able to determine why we can't add on to our houses, right?
It's, from what I've researched, it's really because it's an incidental use to the primary structure. It's not intended to be two separate single-family households. And so that's how the law ends up looking at it, is that it's incidental. And it's not able to be sold separately from the primary dwelling because it's on the same parcel, it's under one ownership.
I'm talking about attached. I mean,
Yeah,
I think we're all in agreement that detached ones they're just too many problems once we start with
Yeah,
those.
it'd be very problematic.
So but I think what we were trying to do was make it easier for someone who actually did have a need for a family member of a familiar or familial relationship, to make it easier for them to add on to their home, without making it a duplex.
Yes.
So, and then we talked about maybe doing a special use where if someone could apply for that and maybe come in and a special use, so an accessory use with conditions means that it can be a blanket from the zoning administrator. He can
Yes,
just
this-
say, go ahead and do that, right?
Yeah, this would be an administrative review, and the reason that it was brought this way tonight
Mhm.
instead of a special land use to begin with is, I gave you guys a section of the ordinance that is, accessory uses with conditions that are already permitted in the agricultural residential district. And it does allow for motorhomes and trailers to currently be reviewed by the zoning administrator and then used for accessory dwelling. Now, I may note that this can obviously be changed so that if you guys still feel that extra restrictions should be imposed and that you think that it is necessary for someone who is applying for it to come before the board and then express that, what extra conditions you think would be necessary, I suppose, for them to come before the board and how that would be implemented. When it comes to that, I think that there needs to be an aspect of application that is different than that of what is already an administrative approval for the allowed mobile and trailer homes. Not that it can't happen, there should be some distinction between it so that it doesn't look like it's picking and choosing.
So when I read that ordinance that you're referring to, the 4.05, did it specify that you had to have a minimum of 80 acres?
That did. So this.
So that would eliminate a lot
Yes.
of parcels in this township, wouldn't it?
Yes.
So I mean, I understand that one was more for the farming community and if, you know,
Yes.
to have your workers, and so I could understand that, but I think we're not comparing apples to oranges.
No, that's good. We just had not set an acreage limit on these yet, so I
Right.
didn't want to assume that until.
So I think the advantage of a special use is someone does have a need that 7 people can take a look at it, and it will be defined their particular situation. When we try to make a blanket policy just to an accessory use even with conditions, I think we're getting into that can of worms again.
And this is written in a way that this can just be shifted up 2 sections so that it's in the special land use. I believe it's.
And I know you're switching over here because Paul one time said if we were gonna do something like that, he said it wouldn't be an ADU. It would be something else, and I'm not sure what he was referring to. But this is still called an ADU. And that may be out of your, because you weren't, I don't know if you were here at that point, but.
I was not.
Okay.
I will say though that this, exactly this language could be moved to be required for a special land use as opposed to the administrative, which is why it's proposed this way, because if you guys were to accept this language, it could be accepted with the condition that it is a special land use.
And I understand if there was an applicant, it would be a little more difficult for them to have to do the special land use and come forward. But I think it's something that reasonable people, if it was a reasonable request, I think that we would be able to, anybody on this commission would be more than willing to work with that. But it would actually give us a case-by-case example to go
Look
off
at the
of
cases
instead
individually
of just making a blanket policy. I see reasons for abuse with it being an accessory use.
Grayson, how would we address Mr. Gold's concern on an applicant needing a special land use? How would that look from our ordinance standpoint? We would still adopt this, would we have to make changes to AR and residential as a special land use? Specify the ADUs as a special land use in that?
Yes, so essentially, there's several sections under each zoning district. It's permitted principal uses with conditions, which is permitted special land uses with conditions, which is where this would be shifted to. And then there's permitted accessory uses and permitted accessory uses with conditions.
Okay.
So it would just be moved to that special land use section, and that's what would require a permit then.
This whole text would be in that special land use.
Yes.
Okay, so it's permitted, yes, it's permitted with these conditions, and that's where these would be.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know, I really think that enabling people to even just apply to have a second house built on their property is just a can of worms that we don't really want to have to explore on a regular basis. I mean, we have no enforcement ability on it. Anybody can be considered family, so you can't mandate blood or adopted or time marriage relatives. You just can't. And they're going to turn into rentals.
Are you
it's
talking
gonna
about
be-
detached or?
Yeah, I mean, so
Detached or attached? Cause this
is-
just
This is
attached.
strictly attached.
Oh,
strictly
Yes,
attached.
Yeah, I think
attached.
I think we've
We
moved
kinda-
on
we
from,
kinda narrowed that down, that detached wasn't something that we wanted to have to deal with. Obviously, if it's zoned agricultural and there's, special use for.
80 acres or
80
more.
acres or more,
Yeah.
and
Right.
then that's.
That falls into
That's
something else.
something different. But if somebody wants to put an addition on their house, they should be allowed to put an addition on their house, as long as they're within the setbacks and
Sure. It's gonna all have to, they're gonna have to hook up to the same septic, or they have to meet the, building codes. Building code requirements and everything, so I mean, same electrical and everything, so.
I think that's what we were trying to determine, what was preventing that from happening.
I mean.
It sounds like it's a gray area.
The building codes are set up, to protect, make sure that the home is built soundly, but also to make sure it's in compliance, and then it's gonna be, the parameters for, the electrical, the plumbing, the waste, everything has to all be for that single family home. So if you're increasing the amount of toilets in the house or something like that, that septic system has to be able to hold that capacity. Or in the case of electrical load, if you put an addition on, or put an addition that's attached on your home, if you have, say, a 100 amp service panel existing, you probably need to upgrade to a 200 amp service panel.
Sure,
Just to allow for those added circuits and everything, so it's just, I don't see any reason why that really, that should be an issue. If somebody wants to put an addition on their home, to house, a family member or something, people have been doing it forever. I think where it gets tricky is this whole question of a detached unit, and we've kind of gone through all of that and hashed that out. I think that's something that we don't really want to deal with, unless, of course, like we said, it's a special use, for agricultural or something like that.
I think we're trying, the decision that we have to make is, do we want applicants for ADUs to come to us and get our blessings and tell us what they're doing, or have Jonathan or whoever the zoning zoning person is, be able to do that administratively? Is that what?
seems like that's the decision.
Yes. But do we even need an ADU to put an addition on your house? That was another question we were trying to answer, and
I don't know that you necessarily need an ADU ordinance, to be
And I think that was one of the questions we were trying to research and find out, and
I think that legal counsel on that would be the best option because it does seem like it comes down to like legal determination of it as opposed to like one physical attribute that we could say, oh, you have 2 kitchens.
Yeah, wasn't it, it had to do with the kitchen and the entry door and what
we
defined
never saw
it?
anything. We never saw it, and that's one of the things we asked for
Concrete
last time was,
Yeah, that,
Well, I
what's
think
the
one thing-
definition?
what prevents it?
Yeah,
What prevents it?
Is a doorway that attaches, you know, it's attached to the house. You have to be able to walk into that house from that addition.
Right, but
You
there
can
was,
have an external door for it as well, but as long as you can get into the main house, then it's not a separate, it's not a duplex.
Right.
I mean, is
If
that
you
all right?
have an attached door within the structure, and maybe you have a separate entrance, but you still have an accessible door within the house, the existing primary residence. I don't think that classifies as a duplex.
Right, exactly, and that's what we need to avoid with this, is
Yep,
not giving people permission to build duplexes.
exactly.
But I think I've asked you before, somebody, I have a 1,500 square foot ranch. I wanna build a mother-in-law's quarter office. You said that you would tell them, you wouldn't give them a land use permit, right?
What I said is that I haven't had that example come to us. I know that Joe did when he was zoning administrator, and he told at least 2 people no because of what they were proposing to build.
And without a land use permit, you go to the building department, and they're gonna send you right back here, and they'll keep sending you right back here until you have a land use permit, and the township's blessings to do that.
Right, so I mean, people do have the right to appeal the zoning administrator's decision, so, you know, when Joe did that, he could write them a denial letter, and then they can use that to either appeal their decision to the ZBA, or there are other options that they can do, but.
Or apply for a variance or something. If
Well,
there's- Depending on the plan.
Well, the problem is the variance is, you're saying that you're gonna vary from the ordinance, but you can't grant a variance that changes the
Okay.
ordinance. It
Yeah.
can only be under
Right.
the ordinance that
Yeah, yeah.
you're asking for that variance.
Okay.
So taking that a little bit further, do we know the criteria he used to deny it? That's what I'm looking
Yeah,
for.
that's-
Septic field.
Because we're talking about an ordinance, you can't modify the ordinance, but what is the ordinance that says you can't do it? Or what was the criteria used to deny it?
I mean, when you looked at the plans, they were 2 completely separate units. They had a hallway that had a door between them. And so his opinion was, that's a duplex. And so he denied them the ability to construct what they wanted to construct.
Okay. But it would be on a case-by-case basis, obviously, if they come forward. So I mean, but there could be modifications to that, that that he could have presented to him to make it not a duplex?
I think we could stick here, which is, the question is, at what point is it a duplex?
Yeah.
And that's the question that you're
That's
really
the
asking.
question. Yeah,
Sure.
What point does it become a
So-
duplex
so
and
I-
not a mother-in-law suite, or, I mean, what are the,
I
Check
think
boxes
the point
that-
it becomes a duplex is if you have a separate electrical meter, if you have a service door or entrance door, you know, that's into the unit, but you don't have an accessible door from inside the primary residence to the accessory, or to the addition. You know what I mean? So I think there's pretty cut and dry things that would specify if it was a duplex versus a.
And we all know that can change. We say it has to have a doorway to the adjoining structure. It does today. In 10 years, drywall takes care of it.
Yeah.
You know, so we have to understand that what we require, I mean, obviously, some people just don't have the ordinances, period. Hence, this violation list we get each month. So it's tough to come up with a perfect ideal scenario, because I don't think there is one, but I do think this is a better option for sure. And I've always kind of felt if you're building this for college kids, kids that are failed to launch, disabled family members, I'd want them close by.
Right.
You know,
Right. And let's be honest, I mean, especially with aging parents, there's a financial concern that if they don't have the financial resources, they literally have no option but to take care of their family member.
Sure.
I mean, like my daughter-in-law is Japanese, and in the Japanese culture, they take care of their elderly parents. When their parents get to a certain age, they automatically move them in with the primary family, and that's a societal thing. You know, that's just what they do, and I think that, you know, I think more and more people in this country are, you know, are faced with that all the time. You want your elderly parents or grandparents, whatever, to be able to live self-sufficiently for as long as they possibly can, but when they get to a point where they can't, then you either, I know like with my grandfather, for example, we had to, we didn't have the space to put my grandfather in my home at the time because we still had young kids at home, but my oldest daughter, who was a she was a CNA, now she's an ICU nurse, but when she was a CNA, she actually took my grandfather into her home. This was before she had any kids, and she watched. She turned one of her bedrooms downstairs into a place for Grandpa, and that's where he spent his last almost 2 years, and he passed away in that house. And it was an option for him because he didn't have the financial resources, and we didn't want to put him in a nursing home, you know, which you might consider just a Medicaid type thing. You know, we just didn't want to do that. So, and my daughter offered to take care of him, and so I was his you know, I took care of his affairs and everything, and that's what we did. So it's something that there's a lot of people that have to deal with that, and I think to be able to give them the option to be able to do that is important.
So do you feel that the ordinance and the proposed ordinance as written addresses those needs, or do you think it needs something else? Are there additional checkboxes you want?
Or do we even need it? That's what we need to, that's what we need to determine.
I think, I agree with everything in the language.
Yeah, I like this version myself.
And I think this is something that we need to make allowable for residents. I think the way that it's written, if somebody goes down the path that does this, I think it's gonna be expensive, but it's gonna preserve our neighborhoods the way people have bought into them and their expectations. You know,
Yeah.
I think it allows for that, and people can legitimately have 500-600 square feet for grandma or mom or dad, and be able to do it.
Now, this would increase the value of your home significantly. I mean, anybody in their
And when you
middle
go to
age
sell-
would see this and say, wow, this is great. It
You go to
addresses
sell
that
that house,
future issue.
when you go to put that house on the market, that house is gonna be sold with the added square footage, and it's gonna be listed with a mother-in-law quarter on there. They do it all the time. I see them. My wife was a realtor. They do it all the time.
You're not gonna see them as earn extra income by
No.
renting a house. I
Because
agree with that.
It's an attached,
I agree with
it's an
that.
attached, and it's on the square footage, so.
Are you talking about special use or? accessory use.
I don't know. I think the special loop is gonna be an extra, hoop for residents to jump through. I think this has enough teeth to it to be able to have it fit to what I think everyone wants here maybe, or what the residents want. My trust is with the building department to make sure that these things are safe and that these things adequately serve the needs of the residents. And I think it will, and it keeps it close by. I'm glad we're all in agreement that detached is not the way we want to go. I was actually surprised, if somebody has 100 acres and they're growing strawberries, they want to put a mobile home out there, I think that's appropriate. So I think I would side with not having a special land use necessary to be able to do this.
Yeah, the 10 standard zoning for putting an addition in your home applies here. The setbacks, you can't put it in front of your house.
Right.
So if we're gonna call it an ADU, I would require, my personal opinion would be to have a special use, to have a little more say on it. So, that's just my opinion.
People can still do it. This would be part of it. They would just have to come to a meeting and get a special land use permit.
Sure. But it would be 7 people looking at their particular circumstances.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah, I'm not opposed to
back to
that.
what Sharon was saying, I agree, there is always the opportunity for, somebody to abuse and try and use that added space as a rental. It's gonna happen. But I don't know that this necessarily is going to, by putting this in place, we've listed, including one of the stipulations being a family member in there. So, yeah, to say that it could potentially be a rental and somebody could abuse it or whatever, even if it's attached, there's that possibility. But I don't know that that's necessary. I think basically what this says, this ADU ordinance says, is that we're doing our part to see that this is not, abused. And if somebody else does that, I don't think that should fall on us.
Renting an attached ADU is not much different than putting up an ad on Marketplace saying, I'm renting out a spare bedroom, utilities included. It's very close to it. And
you can't necessarily control that. Your next door neighbor can do that. You could have a house that we have 4 bedrooms in our house. If, when all my kids moved out, if I wanted to have a boarder or something, and I remember my grandmother in Detroit, all her kids had moved away, she had a boarder that she rented an upstairs bedroom. It's because she needed the money.
Yeah, my issue is if you're gonna be a little more selective on who you bring into your house if they're living under your roof as compared
Of course.
to a rental.
True.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that was why I think detached really kind of separated that a little bit too much. Whereas if it's an attached unit, smaller square footage and everything, I think you're gonna be a little bit more choosy about who is living right on the other side of that wall.
Yeah, and has full access to your valuable property,
Right.
so.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and I was not in support of anything that didn't include a detached ADU at one point. just because that's what I heard people want, but I would be in support of this as an avenue for at least this, you know, so.
I was the same as you, Mike. At first, when we first started looking at this, I thought, you know, what somebody wants to do on a piece of property, they should be allowed to do, but, then when we started to look at it a little bit more,
Yeah.
I just.
That's what I agree. I mean,
feel that
coming down,
detached does open a can of worms, and there was a lot of valid points that a lot of people made, you know.
And I think by
including the
making,
public, including people in the
Yes.
public.
sure. And I think by making it a special use, in my opinion, by making them go to the extra step, I think they're gonna be really legitimate.
Mhm.
Because they're gonna take that extra step. And they're not just gonna be looking to do it to
Right.
throw a rental out.
Yeah, that's good.
And if someone, there's no cost to a resident to come to a planning meeting and do have a special hearing? Or there is, unless they wanna have a special, okay,
Yeah, there's a cost to that.
that's what is that,
Is it-
$250?
Yeah, it is.
I've never done one.
Oh.
Honestly, I don't know offhand how much it costs.
I
but I
would
guess if you're
safely say it's not
yeah,
prohibitive.
right, if you're gonna,
No, if you're going this route.
if you're going this route, you're $250 is not.
Compared to appealing a ZBA decision, which runs what, $300-400?
Is it that 1,000?
Did it go up? I know one's different if it's a commercial one compared to a citizen, but I know the citizen was $400.
Before the ZBA is 400 for residential.
Okay.
I don't know if that's the same for challenging, zoning determination.
It
The
was.
most recent fee schedule says that a special use permit is $750.
How much?
$750.
No matter what.
Can we reduce that?
Yeah.
Can we waive it? I don't know.
They can't, you can at the board.
I think the whole goal is to try and make this with some restrictions, but make it as easy as possible for people so that they can be in
Sure.
compliance, but at the same time achieve what they need to do for their family.
No, I think having that requirement is, I mean, $750 isn't pocket change, but if you're looking at putting an addition on your home to bring in family, you're gonna do that.
Yeah, it's just one of the things.
I say we make a motion to make it less than that. We can put it to the board, whether the board approves it or not is up to the board, right?
I would say to make a recommendation to the board if that's
Sure.
what you want, and then the board can take it up and try to make a determination. You do have to follow the public hearing guidelines, so there is work involved at the staff level, to get the public hearings done, so.
But could there be a streamlined process for something as simple as this?
So I think the streamlined process is actually what he provided, which is it's an administrative review for whoever the zoning administrator is. If you're talking about is that special use that's over and above that, so it would not be an administrative review internally, it would be coming before, this board to make a determination as to whether they can get what they're asking or not.
Okay.
Alarms go off, we have that vibrate, just FYI. But could the board amend the fee structure to have a lower fee for a special land use request on an ADU?
Absolutely, I mean, it doesn't currently exist, but yes, there's no
Okay.
reason it couldn't.
Right, that could be done.
We're already reviewing the fee schedule internally just because on a few items we've noticed that it doesn't really cover the expense. The goal is never to make money, the goal is to make sure you're covering your expenses for things, so, we've noticed a few things that probably should be adjusted, so there's no reason why
Okay.
this couldn't be, a different item.
If that was gonna be sought after, I would be okay with the special land use on this. I think $750 is what's appropriate. I don't think anything less than that is probably good.
I don't think it's a make it or break it either. I mean, you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars for an addition on your home.
It is what people are, I think, most irritated with, especially if you go to like the ZBA, because you're asking for a thing, so you pay all this money to then find out the answer. If they
Yeah, too.
knew that it was was $750 to get the permit, I think they would be fine with it.
Right.
It's
exactly.
Yeah,
I
you're-
spent $750 to be told
you're
no.
rolling it.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
right.
I think that's where the
okay, yeah.
frustration
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Understood, yeah, okay.
Yeah, because if you're told yes, then they're not gonna care about the $750.
Right.
It's if they're told no, it's just like, well, that felt like a big waste of money.
Sure.
Mhm.
So the question is, we would be adding another step and an expense to someone to go through that, and the review would be us and not Jonathan. But I don't know what we would add on top of this that you couldn't add. I'm not seeing that.
Well, generally when it comes to this board, the planner also reviews it, so you would get their review letter and would, find if you're satisfied with the conditions that are in here, the question is who reviews it. So if it comes before you, planner and planning commission reviews it. If it's, with conditions, then that doesn't happen as administrative. Same steps would happen, the question is who's doing it, who did it.
I think the difference in there is that some things are open to interpretation. Same with like the zoning administrator's decision for someone that has to go to the ZBA, right? So if the zoning administrator decides he interprets it one way, their option is to go to the ZBA, but it's gonna cost them $400. So there's 7 different opinions here, plus a planner. I think it makes the process more democratic, maybe? I don't know, however you wanna look at it, but we got 7 different people looking at it. And we're all residents here.
Right.
Nothing against the zoning administrator, that's just the way I'm looking at
The
it.
zoning administrator doesn't have to be a resident, so.
Sure, right,
And professional input from the planner is
sure.
valuable. I mean,
Because I think for each individual plan, it's gonna be different.
Yeah. Each
So
situation is different.
every lot's different, the neighbors are in a different spot. I think maybe a neighbor should be able to come in and express their concerns, which with a zoning administrator decision, they couldn't do that, correct?
Right, so if you do go through what you're talking about, then there would be a public hearing, and so that would give any neighbor an opportunity to speak.
I think that has a lot of value
That's a good point.
compared to
I
just,
think that's a good CYA for us. So that it's made known to the public, anybody that has input on it is welcome to come in versus they just get home from work one day and there's a construction crew working next door.
sure.
Well, this is from our class, everybody deserves to be
So,
heard.
do we wanna make that where it has to be a public notice for, or can you just make it a public notice for the immediate neighbors?
Isn't there
I was
supposed to
gonna
be
say,
a
you have to
certain
notify,
footage?
right?
It's a 300-foot rule.
Okay.
Okay,
So if they were here in front of us for a special land use,
so the people
They're
on
gonna
both
notify.
sides of the house and across the street would,
Yeah, all 4
Would be-
all would be notified.
Yeah, 360 degrees, so.
Yeah, or if you had somebody behind you.
We measured 300 feet off every property line to get who it is that has to be notified.
Okay.
okay. I think I could.
I think that's
I think
it's
that's-
important.
And if we have a barrage of these and it becomes a problem or we don't see the need for it, we can always change it. I mean, we can
Well,
always do it administratively if,
the best reason for changing it.
but we're providing an avenue for this to happen for residents, and I think that's important.
I could go with that.
Yep, I agree.
So, if you have a neighbor that maybe you don't get along so well with your neighbor to the east of you.
Sure. But that doesn't necessarily, keep in mind that public comment, you take it under consideration, but it's not a,
Exactly, it's not,
right.
but.
But there's 7 of us that are gonna make that interpretation,
There's
right?
that
So,
potential for,
controversy,
yes.
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 Yes, there would be.
There it is.
I think that's true with any
Absolutely.
Putting an addition on their home or setting up a pole barn, I mean, if you don't get along with your neighbors. I hate that folks want to take these battles into our realm or any of the public enforcement. I mean, frivolous lawsuits are a prime example of that, but it happens.
Something to keep up
Ideally,
in,
a minority of people.
when I was doing research on public comments, one of the analysis was the only people that actually show up to comment are the ones that have something negative to say. So, but it is something to take into consideration.
Survey responses? Okay, well, I think we've beat this up pretty good tonight. We've got some feedback for you.
Would have any changes to the language that needs to be made, other than that it should be a special land use?
You know, I'm a little fuzzy about the family relationship. So I read a legal opinion on that said it's unenforceable. I mean, they considered 4 frat brothers who live together to be a family. You know, and
This goes off the definition of family in your ordinance, but it is a difficult thing to enforce.
because it's unenforceable doesn't mean it shouldn't be there. Because we don't have anybody that doesn't enforce.
Sure, but if they're problem children, they're gonna be under their own roof,
Right.
so that's a plus.
So what do we need to change to incorporate approval of the ADUs as a special land use?
So the only thing that needs to change is where it says section 405, it needs to be 403, and section 605 should be 603.
You'd also be changing the paragraph 10, where you're, I mean, they would submit it to the zoning administrator to come before you, but it's not gonna be an administrative review.
Oh, when they bring you their drawings?
Right.
Okay.
Which we can just remove to the zoning administrator, because if it's a special land use, it has to come before the planning commission.
Right, right, and insert that special land use language in there, and I think we're solid. We're one step closer.
We've been crawling.
So, are we going to propose a motion to postpone this until those changes are made, or are we just gonna, or do we wanna approve it with those conditions, or how do you wanna do it, or?
I would think postpone so we can review it the final time
Yeah.
before it's implemented.
Get the,
Because we have had a lot of feedback from people on this, and I think it's just right that we look at the final product before chiseling in stone.
Do we have enough right now to do this? Cause it seems like we're all in
I mean-
agreement with it.
No.
Unless I'm reading.
I can be outvoted.
Wrong.
But I'd still like to see the final, I mean, if it's just a matter of making the changes and bringing back the final product and we vote on it, at least it'll be in front of us.
Let's just look at it next month.
Yeah.
We'll make a decision, hopefully, can we do that?
Yes.
Of course. I need to.
You're gonna have to do it anyway, right?
I'll do whatever you want.
so,
I will approve this.
I agree with Robert, I didn't wanna see it again. See it on paper.
yeah, I don't wanna see it again.
But after putting this into it, we wanna make sure it's right before
Yeah,
it goes on, right?
Have to, yep. So we need a motion.
We do, we need a motion. Any takers? It's the last motion, well, almost the last motion, anyway.
Sure, I'll make a motion to postpone action on the proposed text amendment so the following items can be addressed. That all changes that were discussed in this meeting are added to the final ordinance.
Do we need?
Special use.
Special use, special use.
I'll support.
Okay. Once
Sorry.
again, we have a motion from Mike, ruled by Robert, or vice versa. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. I'm encouraged that we're making some solid progress on this ADU. I know it's been a long road, but I think the end is in sight. Okay, next item up is our call to the public, which is non-existent, so we will move on to our final agenda item. Do we have a motion for adjournment?
Hold on one second.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to ask you guys though, do you want me to reach out to, Mark Bostic from Ahaka to see if he could come in and we could kind of ask him the questions about the solar panels, what they're doing as compared to maybe what he could probably answer a lot of the questions that we had amongst ourselves, because I'm sure they've been talking about this over time.
I surely have no opposition to, for someone to come in with some experience on this.
Too much knowledge is not a thing, so,
What?
too much knowledge is not a thing.
Because now it's hard.
And here's the thing, he may have the answers to questions that we haven't even thought of.
Right.
And that's a trick with any project. You know some things you don't know, but the things you don't know that you don't know are what come out perfect.
All right, I'll reach out to him.
Thank you, that'd be great. Did we vote on adjournment?
I move to adjourn.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.